On February 28, 2026, the world watched as one of the most sophisticated air defense networks on the planet seemingly collapsed in a matter of hours. For decades, Iran had poured billions of dollars into creating a fortress. It was a dense, overlapping shield of Russian S-300s and their own advanced Bavar 373 systems, all designed to make their airspace impenetrable. This network was supposed to deter any attack, to make the price of aggression unthinkably high. But when the test came, US and Israeli jets were operating over the country with what one American general called relative impunity. The fortress was breached. The shield was worthless. So, how did they do it? How did they systematically pull apart a network that was meant to be the final guarantee of Iran's sovereignty, and in doing so, pave the way for a conflict that would change the Middle East forever? To really grasp the scale of this collapse, you first have to understand the fortress that was built. Iran's Integrated Air Defense System, or IADS, wasn't just a random collection of missile batteries. It was a strategic national asset, a complex, multi-layered web with a single purpose: deny enemy aircraft the freedom to fly over Iran. For years, military analysts saw it as a formidable challenge, a dragon's den of advanced surface-to-air missiles, or SAMs. At the top of this network were two crown jewels. The first was the Russian-made S-300 PMU-2. After years of political drama and delays, Iran finally got these systems, and it was a massive leap in their capability. The S-300 isn't just one weapon. It's a whole family of systems famous for its ability to track and hit multiple targets at once, including stealth aircraft and ballistic missiles, all at very long ranges. Its powerful radar could peer deep into neighboring countries, giving Iranian commanders early warning and the power to project a threat far beyond their own borders. The S-300's arrival was a game changer, forcing military planners in both Tel Aviv and Washington to go back to the drawing board. But Iran wasn't satisfied with just relying on foreign tech. Pushed by sanctions and a doctrine of self-sufficiency, its engineers worked to create a domestic version, and the result was the Bavar 373. Unveiled with a lot of fanfare, the Bavar, which means belief, was billed as Iran's answer to the S-300, and maybe even an improvement. Iranian officials claimed it could detect and kill high-altitude, long-range targets with even better precision. It had a modern vertical launch system, a phased-array radar, and was designed to be highly mobile, making it much harder to find and destroy. Together, the S-300 and Bavar 373 were the top tier of Iran's defenses. They were the long-range guardians, able to threaten jets and bombers from hundreds of kilometers away. But under this high-altitude umbrella, there were more layers. You had medium-range systems like the Rad and the Sevam Khordad, the same system that famously shot down a U.S. Global Hawk drone back in 2019. And below that, a dense web of shorter-range guns and man-portable missile systems, or manpads, all there to protect critical targets from low-flying planes and helicopters. On paper, it was a textbook defense in-depth strategy. Any attacking force would have to chew its way through wave after wave of threats. First, the long-range S-300s and Bavars. Anything that got through would face the medium-range batteries. And any aircraft that somehow made it to a target would still have to fly through a storm of close-in fire. The whole system was interconnected, sharing radar data to build a single comprehensive picture of the sky. It was designed to be redundant, tough, and deadly. This was the fortress the US and Israel had to crack. It was a problem that needed not just a bigger hammer, but a much, much smarter key. The dismantling of Iran's air defense fortress wasn't a single dramatic event on February 28th. It was really the final act of a long, methodical campaign of degradation, technological dominance, and brilliant strategic planning. This process had been quietly unfolding for years, long before the first shots of the 2026 war were ever fired. The first part of the strategy was simple attrition, a process some planners call mowing the lawn. The idea is to weaken the network piece by piece so that when the big push comes, the system is already fragile. This began with a series of earlier, undeclared strikes. A fictional Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025 reportedly served as a full-dress rehearsal. In that operation, advanced U.S. F-35s and B-2 Spirit stealth bombers allegedly flew over Iran, testing the system's responses and mapping the blind spots in the S-300 and bavar 373 networks. According to reports that came out after the 2026 conflict, those stealth aircraft met no effective resistance, giving planners priceless data on the system's real-world weaknesses. These quiet probes were paired with more obvious strikes. Real-world conflicts in October 2024 and a bigger clash in June 2025 had already started chipping away at Iran's capabilities. Every time a missile launcher was hit or a radar site was damaged, another hole was punched in the defensive web. Israel, in particular, was focused on this systematic degradation. In the opening hours of the February 2026 war, the IDF specifically hit at least 11 key air defense sites in western Iran, including a critical battery at an IRGC base in Kermanshah. This wasn't random, it was surgical. They were carving a safe corridor for the main attack force, establishing air superiority over a huge piece of territory right from the start. By the time the main offensive kicked off, Iran's IADS was no longer a complete, integrated system. It was a fragmented, battle-worn network that was already on its heels. But degrading the system wasn't enough. It still had to be beaten on the day. This is where technology, specifically electronic warfare, or EW, came into play. Put simply, EW is the art of blinding and tricking your enemy. Instead of just blowing up a radar, you can make it so the radar can't see anything. Or you can make it see things that aren't actually there. U.S. and Israeli forces are masters of this. They rolled out a whole suite of jamming and spoofing platforms. Airborne electronic attack jets like the U.S. Navy's EA-18G Growler can flood enemy radars with so much digital noise that the operators can't tell a real target from static. Even more sinister are the deception techniques. Instead of just jamming the signal, they can inject fake data right into the enemy's network. Imagine an Iranian radar operator seeing a dozen F-35s on his screen when there are actually 100. Or, even more confusing, seeing 100 targets when there are only a dozen, tricking them into wasting their limited missiles on ghosts. This electronic chaos paralyzes the command structure. When you can't trust your own screens, you hesitate. And in air combat, hesitation is fatal. With the network already weakened and now blinded by electronic warfare, the final blow was a perfectly synchronized, overwhelming wave of force. This tactic, often called a time-on-target strike, is like a brutal symphony of destruction. It involves all kinds of different assets, launched from different places at different times, all timed to arrive at their targets at the exact same second. First come the decoys. These are small, cheap drones or missiles designed to look like a much bigger fighter jet on radar. They're launched in swarms, sent right into the teeth of whatever air defenses are still active. The Iranian operators, their screens already a mess of noise and phantoms, now see a wave of what look like real threats. They have a choice: open fire, giving away their position and using up their missiles, or hold back and risk letting a real attacker slip through. As the decoys are drawing fire, the next wave hits: anti-radiation missiles. These weapons are hunters, designed specifically to kill radar systems. They home in on the very signals the S-300s and bavars use to see. The second an Iranian battery turns on its radar to shoot at a decoy, it paints a giant target on its own back. And then, in that very same moment, the final wave hits. Stealth fighters like the F-35, which have been flying undetected deep inside the kill zone, suddenly appear and launch precision bombs at the now exposed missile launchers. High-altitude bombers release their payloads on command centers and supply depots. The whole attack, from decoys to radar hunters to the main strike, is compressed into a window of just a few seconds. The Iranian network wasn't just defeated, it was saturated. It was asked to do too many things at once, and it simply broke. This is why a senior U.S. official could confidently say that Iran's air defenses were effectively suppressed. It's why one general, assessing the campaign, declared that most of Iran's high-end systems, the S-300s and bavar 373s that were the nation's pride, were no longer factors. There was a report of an F-35 being hit on March 19, 2026, a reminder that no operation is without risk, but it was the exception that proved the rule. For the most part, the most advanced fighters in the world were now operating freely over a country that had spent billions to stop them. The fortress had been unlocked, its gates thrown wide open. With the air defense network shattered, the entire strategic picture of the conflict changed, completely and permanently. Free reign over Iranian skies went from being a military goal to a brutal reality. For Iran, the consequences were catastrophic. The first and most shocking result? The decapitation of the regime's leadership. In the opening hours, a precision strike hit a high-level meeting on Pasteur Street in Tehran, a nerve center of the government. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed, along with senior commanders of the IRGC and members of the National Security Council. This wasn't a lucky shot. It was an attack made possible only by absolute air superiority. The ability to track leaders and strike them with impunity in the heart of the capital, reportedly during sensitive nuclear talks, showed a total failure of Iran's protective bubble. Khamenei's death created an instant power vacuum, throwing the regime into chaos right when it needed to be mounting a defense. With the skies now open, U.S. and Israeli forces began to systematically destroy Iran's ability to fight back. Iran's main deterrent had always been its huge arsenal of ballistic missiles and drones. The strategy was to overwhelm any enemy with sheer numbers. But that strategy only works if you can protect your launchers and factories. Without air cover, they were just sitting ducks. In the first days of the war, Iran did unleash a massive barrage, firing over 500 missiles and more than 2,000 drones by March 5th. About 40% were aimed at Israel, the rest at U.S. bases around the region. It was a huge display, but it wasn't sustainable. Allied air power relentlessly hunted down the launchers. Pre-war intelligence and strikes had already taken out a big chunk, up to 2/3 of the launchers, and nearly half the missiles were gone before the main fight even started. Now, with planes circling overhead providing real-time intelligence, the rest were being picked off one by one. After March 4th, the missile launch rates dropped sharply, a clear sign that stockpiles were running low and the launch infrastructure was being destroyed. The campaign was also targeting the factories that built the missiles, an effort expected to take weeks. The IRGC's naval power was also wiped out. In a stunning show of force enabled by air power, over 50 Iranian naval vessels were reported sunk, crippling Iran's ability to operate in the Persian Gulf. The economic war also came into focus, centered on the Strait of Hormuz. For years, Iran had threatened to close this choke point, where about 20% of the world's oil flows. In the past, this threat was a powerful weapon. But in 2026, it backfired. As the conflict started, Iran made its usual threats, but it no longer had the air and naval power to actually enforce a blockade. It didn't have to. The threats alone were enough. Major shipping companies suspended all routes through the area, leaving ships stranded and effectively shutting down the strait. The impact on global markets was immediate. The price of oil shot past $100 a barrel, sending an economic shockwave across the globe. This exposed the flip side of Iran's geographic power. While the shutdown hurt the world economy, it also cut off Iran's own economic lifeline. The shadow fleet of tankers it used to evade sanctions was now useless in a de facto war zone. An ultimatum from the former Trump administration demanded the strait's reopening, but Iran, with its military being dismantled from the air, was in no position to do anything. The threat to close the strait, once a sign of strength, had become a self-inflicted wound. A sky without guardians had led to a nation without defenses, without leadership, and without its most powerful economic weapon. The fictional war of 2026 demonstrates a brutal lesson in modern warfare. Even an expensive, dense air defense network is no match for an enemy that is patient, technologically superior, and thinks in multiple domains at once. Iran's fortress, built on the mighty S-300 and Bavar 373, wasn't brought down by a single magic bullet. It was systematically unraveled. It was a death by 1,000 cuts that began long before the final assault. When the time came, it was blinded by masterful electronic warfare, its operators unable to trust their own screens. And finally, it was simply overwhelmed by a perfectly synchronized swarm of decoys, missiles, and stealth aircraft. The result was the complete neutralization of Iran's most important strategic asset. This single failure enabled the decapitation of its leadership and the destruction of its offensive power, leaving the regime's very survival in question. This campaign has rewritten the rules of air defense and sets a new standard for how future wars might be fought. And it leaves us with a critical question. As technology gets better and better, can any nation really build a shield that can't be broken? Or is the future just a permanent contest between the seen and the unseen, where the sky will always belong to whoever controls the spectrum itself? If you want to see more in-depth analysis of modern military conflicts, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let us know in the comments what other battles or weapon systems you want us to break down next.